But I think also pride of place where the armaments that we saw in China has come a long way in terms of its weaponry. And I think both Trump and the rest of NATO would have looked at with certain amount of envy and concern the kind of stealth planes, the kind of anti-ballistic missiles, the drones, submarine drones, plus laser technology. All of this were quite remarkable, it not only in terms of the technological advancement, but also the amount of size and the industrial capacity of China. China has truly arrived in the world in terms of a nation, civilization that if it is not directly competing or necessarily looking for global domination. I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Zafar. We didn't receive the kind of reception you would expect given our military strength, given our demonstration of using Chinese equipment. At that time, China was very pleased. Nevertheless, I think it was less than overwhelming in terms of reception. Even on the parade day, even though our Prime Minister managed to get in the frame, but really it was the three of them, that is the North Korean, Russian, and Chinese leaders, that were supposed to dominate.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Talking Politics. I'm Hassan Zafar and we have Javed Hassan with us. He's an economist. He writes for the Arab News. And today we are going to talk about the aftermath of the SCO Summit that took place in Tianjin, China, and the victory parade that followed the summit, and what is happening in the world. A lot of readjustment, a lot of realignment, and alongside this, the US-India rift over the tariffs. Thank you very much, Javed Hassan Saab. So this is what we have on the plate today.
Thank you, Dr. Zafar, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be discussing these things with you.
Indeed, sir. About interesting developments taking place. Saudi Arabian companies and Iraq have halted their oil supply to the Indian refineries. It has just taken place a couple of days ago. Was reported by Reuters first, and now Bloomberg is also talking about it. So, how do you see all this? What is the what are the key takeaways from the summit, the parade, and now this?
Okay, just to very quickly first on the halting of the supplies to Indian refineries. Those are the two refineries where there is partial or considerable ownership by the Russians. Because under the sanction regime, those companies which are Russian-owned, they cannot be supplied by either Iraqi or Saudi Arabian companies, and that's where it stopped. Otherwise, there are other companies where Saudi Arabia continues to supply petroleum to. So I think it's important to clarify that. But I think huge developments, and it's a struggle to actually sum it all up. The world is changing dramatically in front of our eyes. I think just to start off with the events which are latest, which was yesterday, which was the parade, which was truly a remarkable parade. There was something like, I think, something like 26 nations there. If you imagine, there were 4 nuclear power countries there. There was something like of the 16 neighboring countries that China has, 11 were there. It was very dramatic. There were quite a few European countries, the Euro-Asian countries, but obviously the key participants were and who took the limelight were Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. So I think those were the pride of place. But I think also pride of place were the armaments that we saw in China. China has come a long way in terms of its weaponry. And I think both Trump and the rest of NATO would have looked at with certain amount of envy and concern the kind of stealth planes, the kind of anti-ballistic missiles, the drones, submarine drones, plus laser technology. All of this were quite remarkable. It not only in terms of the technological advancement, but also the amount of size and the industrial capacity of China. China has truly arrived in the world in terms of a nation, civilization that if it is not directly competing or necessarily looking for global domination, but it is
Yeah.
a rival to America. And that message was very clearly conveyed. And I think the European capitals had to wake up to that.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of emphasis on civilization in the speeches of the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. One thing is very striking, the kind of extraordinary treatment and protocol that was accorded to Kim Jong-un of North Korea, although we know North Korea is not a great economy, is not really a great contributor to the world affairs. They are quite isolationist. So if we say that economic progress and economic potential is the marker of any nation's importance, so North Korea is far from that. So why was this extraordinary treatment given to the North Korean leader?
I think we have now, over the last 30, 40 years, under sort of neoliberal thinking, come to think that economic dominance is the critical thing. That has not been for vast periods of human history. Vast periods of human history, what we have always thought is the importance of military strength. Much of 17th, 18th century, and even going before that, it was always military strength. And in fact, if you think about it, the rise of the British Empire, then subsequently the American Empire, was, while it was backed by economic strength, always had the military might behind it to actually go and enforce its might. So I think in that way, given that North Korea is now an accepted nuclear power, it has as many as 120, 130 nuclear warheads, it has missile technology. It is a major military power globally, whether one accepts its economic might or not. And that's why it was accorded. And I think one of the reasons why it was accorded that kind of respect was because I think Putin very much wanted Kim Il-jong to be given that respect, and he was invited at the behest, almost, I think, of Vladimir Putin. But
And
I
they rode
think
together in the same car afterwards, yes.
I think in this modern world, given what we see, and in the way, I don't want to digress, but given the way Israel has blasted countries and caused havoc across the Middle East, it shows that you can have all the economic might, but unless you have the military prowess to contend with with aggressive tendencies of neighbors, all your economic might can be torn asunder. So we live in difficult times, and in this, military might is important. And I think that's, to a certain extent, unfortunately or fortunately, what is China was displaying. I think you mentioned one thing, and we need to come back. I think the arrival of Prime Minister Modi, Narendra Modi, was very important. It was a very important signaling mechanism. What Mr. Modi was suggesting to America, given the recent contretemps, the sort of displeasure that is prevailing in India, the anger by Trump's treatment in terms of tariffs,
Yeah.
in terms of
I want to
very
come to
often
this a little
insulting.
later, Javed sir.
Okay.
I want to come to India exclusively a little later, but there are some other pressing questions I would like to
Sure.
say. You very rightly pointed out military might matters, and we saw that in Middle East. We saw that in case of North Korea, and we also saw that in case of Pakistan. Pakistan economy, of course, you know it very well. It's not doing well for past several years now. Uh, but despite all that, Pakistan is a strategic partner of China, and they have the flagship project CPEC in Pakistan. But given all that background and history, Operation Sindoor, and the Chinese support to Pakistan, military support to Pakistan, with regard to PL-15 missiles, they gave us uh, their own version of it. Uh, Everything we know. But still, if you look at the uh, group photos, the Pakistani Prime Minister does not really feature very significantly in those pictures. And then we also know that the Field Marshal General Asim Munir also arrived in China for the parade, and the kind of treatment that was given to him was a lot significant than it was accorded to the Prime Minister. So, is that a signal from China to Pakistan that they are not very happy with the political setup in Pakistan because of their sluggish behavior with regard to the Chinese projects that are over delayed, many are pending. So you see that kind of signal through this?
I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Zafar. We didn't receive the kind of reception you would expect given our military strength, given our demonstration of using Chinese equipment. At that time, China was very pleased. Nevertheless, I think it was less than overwhelming in terms of reception. Even on the parade day, even though our Prime Minister managed to get in the frame, but really it was the three of them, that is the North Korean, Russian, and Chinese leaders that were supposed to dominate. And we managed to get Shahbaz Sharif Sahib very briefly. I think on the whole, we have to remember that Pakistan, unfortunately, because of its economic travails, really acts as a supplicant always. Whenever it goes to China, it goes with a request for some kind of further financial assistance. And whenever you are in such a position, you are inevitably weakened despite whatever your military strength might be. And it has to be remembered, much of this military strength is also coming directly as a result of Chinese lagis. So the Chinese would be very, very aware of it, and accordingly treat Pakistan with some degree of some degree of, not, I wouldn't say disrespect, but not the same level of.
But the enthusiasm is conspicuously missing from the reception. It was very obvious.
It was missing. You're absolutely right. Even the declarations afterwards, even the discussions regarding CPEC, there's no concrete announcement in terms of expanding CPEC investments. It was all pretty tepid. Even the B2B business seminar that took place, there's no commitment, even though Pakistan government wanted to see something like $5 billion of investments. I think number of reasons. Pakistan hasn't managed to reform its economy as much as would have been expected, despite being something like the third IMF program already. Pakistan's economy is not on a trajectory that is towards growth. And frankly speaking, we are pretty down the road. So this is not a country that is a natural attractor of investments. So if given that all that, why should China accord it that kind of respect? And I think we have also, given the security issues in terms of the investments that are already there for the Chinese, and there have been concerns about that. I think there's a tepid, very tepid reception.
Yes, but would you also like to comment on that personalities also matter, and Chinese are, of course, not oblivious to the fact it's been 10 years down the road since the Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Pakistan in 2015. And ever since, the progress on CPEC projects, CPEC 1 especially, it's been quite sluggish, and they definitely know who's responsible uh, for all this that has happened and that has not happened during this past decade. So it was a response.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I think Pakistan, there has been a lot of slow progress. There's been pretty bad management in terms of the CPEC projects, other than the electricity, which in turn we are not paying up on the dues. So that itself also is, in some ways, a failure from the Chinese perspective. So there's very little for the Chinese to say they should rush ahead with CPEC 2 at this point.
Yeah, and we also know it was from the maybe last 2 years. We had some reports that the Chinese workers in Pakistan, they had some problems in getting their visas extended, and the government officials were demanding favors in return. So that kind of thing, and such reports definitely have
They get back
reached to
right to
the
the top. Absolutely,
yeah,
Dr. Sabri.
these
They get
these
back right to
things.
the top.
Yeah,
The
they
Chinese are
so
a very unified command. They tend to work together. Everything that happens to their staff at the lowest level to the top level
yeah,
gets reported.
especially the
People are
custom officials at Karachi port and other ports. They have it was a hearsay, but we heard these things happening to the Chinese uh, workers, especially those who are importing Chinese machineries and other goods, etc. So these things have really uh, figure in the kind of reception that is accorded to a political leader. But at the same time, military diplomacy is doing very well. So that is the kind of conflict that is emerging in the furthering the CPEC 2 project and this B2B thing that just came up. It was a response. Yes.
it's a disparaging term, and I personally hope that is not true. But there is often the term that is used that Pakistan, from the Chinese perspective, is seen as the borrowed dagger. So, in terms of strategic purposes for weaponry and for armament to test and to Pakistan is pretty good. And as a reminder to India as well, that on your western front you have difficulties. So in that way, Pakistan serves a very important strategic purpose, and for that reason, the defense ties remain strong, but the economic ties, by comparison, are relatively weak.
And the burden is, of course, on the political leadership because they are the people on ground to implement those projects and execute them effectively. So that is the kind of thing. Yes.
I think the burden, the responsibility is entirely on Pakistan. If we can deliver, the Chinese are always willing to invest. That's a that's a country that has huge reserves, has huge amounts of capacity to invest. It's always looking for investment opportunities. But Pakistan must demonstrate that investment in this country is profitable and timely and makes sense. If we can demonstrate that we have viable projects, I think China would have come in. Unfortunately, so far, we have not managed to do so.
Yeah, because of a number of reasons that we have discussed plenty of times before. Let's move on to the India part. The presence of Narendra Modi in the SCO and his enthusiasm with President Putin and other leaders who were present there. So, how do you see that kind of demeanor that he was exhibiting at that forum?
I think we have to keep in mind the backdrop, which was Trump demanding that Mr. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and India stop buying oil from Russia. There were threats, and there was also the tariff increment from earlier 25%, which was the base, to a further 25%, which seen as a penalty for buying petroleum from Russia. There was also comments by the trade advisor to Mr. Trump in Peter Navarro, which were insulting. They even brought in the caste issue. So all of that summed up has caused a lot of perturbance in India, and I think quite rightfully so. India considers itself a democratic sovereign country. It thinks its trade relationship should not be influenced by other countries. And it took this opportunity to send a message to America that it has alternatives. And especially China is a very useful alternative, because America's great rival today is China. And they have sort of presumed that India is automatically a part of the Western alliance. And I think Narendra Modi and the Indian diplomacy basically made it clear: do not assume anything. We can have many partners, and in a multipolar world, that's what they fundamentally believe in. We can have relationships with China, Russia, and maintain relationships with the Western world. And I think that shows the sovereign capabilities of a country like India, which has I think, whatever we may like or dislike Mr. Modi and Hindutva, but it is a sovereign, democratically elected government, and they have the ability to act accordingly.
Yeah, there's nothing for us to like or dislike in it, but there are two things here. One, it appears to be a welcome sight for the Russians and the Chinese that Modi and Trump have fallen apart. And the Chinese, they have a lot of overproduction, and they need a big market to dump their cheap and middle range goods. So India is very attractive for the Chinese in that sense. And it is very attractive for the Russians because they need to sell their oil. They need to earn money for their country and the military campaign they have in Ukraine. So for both Russia and China, it's a very good proposition. But what does India get out of it? That remains. It's a simple maths. What is India getting out of it? It's total. The balance of trade is totally in favor of China and Russia in that regard. And now we have cherry on the top. I would like to assume that it's on the behest of, or on the indications of President Trump, that Saudi Aramco and the Iraqi company, they have halted oil supply to India.
As I said earlier, the Aramco and Iraqi supplies, they've been stopped to the Russian-owned refineries, but not to India as a whole. So it's somewhat limited. But I think India gets considerable amount should it want to, depending on how it wants to develop these relations. With the relations with Russia, it actually is, even though because of the oil imports, it may be hugely in favor of Russia, but India does sell quite a few products in terms of pharmaceuticals and fertilizers and many other products. So India is actually has a considerable two-way trade with Russia. So I don't think it's that one-sided. In the case of China, it is definitely one-sided. There's a trade deficit of close to 100 billion, with the total trade being two-way trade.
More than that, if we include Hong Kong, Javed Hassan sir, if we include Hong Kong, it's more than 100 billion. It amounts to maybe 150 billion.
Absolutely. So I think we do see a huge advantage towards China. But what India can benefit, and which they've been resisting because of their alliance largely with the West, as well as certain degree of hesitance about fear of Chinese domination, is been that there can be considerable investments from China. China over the last 4 years has been wanting to invest in their telecom technology, especially 5G, now possibly even 6G. They've been wanting to invest in the electric vehicle manufacturing. They also wanted to invest in many financial services. So there could be investments to the tune of anything between 10 to 15 billion. Given the trade surpluses they have, if a small percentage of this flows back into India in terms of investments, it could give India's FDI a considerable boost, especially when the Western investments are slowing down recently.
Yeah, but Indians allowing Chinese investment in telecom is like pushing a self-destruction button when it comes to their defense things, because if the system shifts to Huawei, then the Indian military, the Indian common people, for example, we saw in Op Sindoor that many of the Indian websites were hacked. So if that happens, then India is entirely at the mercy of the Chinese in their defense and security. I'm not thinking in terms of their aircrafts and tanks and all that. Their banks, their railway system, their all other systems, they will be at the mercy of the Chinese. So can Indians let that happen?
It depends on how deep the networks are, but I think there can be protection measures for that. The fact of the matter is that they are allowing other countries. It's not their own development. The networks that is also from the West. So GPS is America. You can say that America can also, should they want, stop the.
Of course, they can. They have the leverage. That's why they are doing what they are doing.
Exactly. So I think India is not entirely independent. And if you think about it, India is a neighbor of China, and it would be much more sensible. And I think I've talked about this in another program and also an article I recently wrote. If you look at the gravity model of trade, it makes much more sense to have trading relationships with something like China, which is in close proximity, as well as both of them being large economies, than something like an America, which is 12,000 miles away.
So the choice is simple. You want to be at the mercy of the United States of America, or you want to be at the mercy of People's Republic of China. So that is the kind of choice they have to make.
I would not put it so in such a binary fashion. I think India is a large country, 1.4 billion people. It has a large economy, 4 trillion. It can play with many countries. And I think if it was in India,
I think India is very attractive, Javed Sahab. I think India is very attractive for any country for the size of their market. So, would you like to think it in terms of the control over the market? The Americans want the control over the market, and the Chinese want to have the control of the Indian market, not the economy. It's the market, consumer economy. Otherwise,
you're absolutely right. But if one has to remember, the kind of products that America produces are so expensive that only a very small percentage of the Indian middle class can buy. In fact, a minuscule amount. Whereas the kind of products Chinese is producing is a whole range. For the middle class, emerging middle class that is coming through in India, the Chinese products are far more viable and far more useful than the American products. So I think in that way, China has a natural advantage.
Yeah, so it can also be seen as a neat division of the market. The Chinese and the Americans can agree, okay, you sell your goods to the upper middle class and the rich Indians, and we'll take the market of the middle class and the lower middle class, and we are good together.
That would be in an ideal world, that's what would happen. And they would also ask both India and America.
Why I'm saying this? Why I'm saying this? Because I heard an American analyst saying that the tariffs on India is a signal to the Chinese that we don't want a confrontation with you. And sorry, it was a mistake that we thought the Indians could fight you in the South China Sea. They are totally incapable of doing that. So let's forget about them. Let's have a good share of the Indian market.
I think you're absolutely. I think you're referring to George Friedman, and very much so that is
No,
it was a very effective signaling mechanism, a multiple signaling mechanism. One was to Russia, one was to China. Russia was that we can, even with our close allies, we can be very tough if we choose to. And with the case of China, please lay off Taiwan because we would rather that you were easy and then we'll go easy on you. And because of that, we'll get tougher on India. It's a possibility. But I think there are many more factors. There's the alternative theory about Trump being upset because Modi would not acknowledge his role in the skirmish of peacemaking.
Yeah, that too. But Michael Kugelman says that the US president will not be really bothered with the personal feelings when it comes to the national policy of the United States. Maybe that it has something to do with how he is treating Prime Minister Modi on a personal level. See his Truth Social messages and all that. They're very interesting. The last thing is where we started today's discussion is the power play. If the North Korea can have a prominent role and prominent place on the podium alongside the Chinese president and Russian president, despite their economic standing, so power is important. And with regard, if we take this measure, the performance of the Indian army on the battlefield with Pakistan in May, has that changed the world's perception about India that they are not capable of fighting and therefore they should be treated the way they are being treated now?
I tend to agree with you. I think the failure of the Indian Air Force to basically display or manage dominance over Pakistan actually was hugely disappointing for many of its allies. It sent a clear signal that if they can't contend with Pakistan, what chance is there of contending with China? So in terms of its strategic importance, it was seen as being lacking for the kind of importance that it was meant to occupy. So I think you're absolutely right. The Operation Sindoor was an own goal for India, and they would have been wiser not to indulge in this kind of skirmish, which has not really paid them any dividends.
Yes, and after that, we have seen that the relationship between India and the United States has been reduced from a strategic partnership to a transactional relationship. So that's how
it's presently quite hostile, I must say, given the kind of comments Mr. Navarro is making, and sometimes even President Trump.
So it's just a big market, consumer market, which everybody wants to have control of. Thank you so much, Javed Hassan, for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Zafar, for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching too. Good night. Khuda Hafiz in Pakistan. Zindabad.